Well, good morning and welcome. So this morning's Fireside Chat, I've got the really distinct honor of moderating and speaking with two really extraordinary individuals in this space. And I thought before we got started, I would set the stage briefly by just talking a little bit about why we're here or how we ended up here. 30 years ago almost now, and it's kind of hard to believe that I've been involved in this space now for about 30 years. I was adding it up this morning, and it's a little bit challenging thought, actually. But when we first started out in this industry, we were making observations such as beating hearts in dishes and bone marrow transplant type observations where cells could affect great cures or help with great cures for patients. We were looking back at an industry in blood industry which had been moving blood around and really providing cellular therapies for quite some time, and starting to realize that there's actually some real value in cells in treating patients. Little did we realize at that time the journey upon which we were about to embark. We thought because these therapies were so pure that they would be effecting cures, that they had the right to get into patients. So we started talking about the journey from bedside, from bench to bedside, and we thought, well, this should be okay. You know, within the next couple of years, we should start seeing massive cures, not just palliative therapies, but massive cures. And we started to imagine, as an industry, as the industry was growing, we started to imagine the wonderful things that we could do with cells that were at that point not able to be accomplished fully with the types of drugs that were available. We never really thought about it and said, wow, this is really not, it's going to be more than just a few scientists sitting at a bench. This is going to take a village, if you will. Many different types of people, many different types of expertise. And as we moved on, regulators started to get involved. Engineers have come in this space. There have been investors. We've become considerably more businesslike. And one by one, we've added a series of expertise to this industry where now, we're here. And it was an observation, I think I felt it deeply in my heart last year at about this time, not far from this place when we met with this meeting. We said, we're finally here as an industry because now we've got a critical mass of everything that we need. All the pieces are in the right place, and all it's going to take now is one more push, and we can push this over the edge. So what's happening right now in the space that's really exciting? Well, what's really exciting is we've got big pharma starting to put their toe in the water again, sometimes for the second or maybe even the third time. Maybe a little bit cautiously, and some with both feet, but big pharma are coming in. There are deals happening now. Maybe the deals are not quite as big as we might think they should be. I think there's a lot of bargains out there right now, but the question on the table is, why now? And so to address this issue, we will speak with these two individuals that I mentioned before today, who are both part of big companies. Big companies, these are companies that could very well sit on the sidelines and wait if they wanted, but they've decided to jump in with both feet, make big investments in the space. And I'd like to talk a little bit today to them and have some audience participation, if you would, asking whatever questions you would like and taking an opportunity to understand from them why they have championed this cause and taken the risks they've taken with their large, stable organizations that really don't need to take risks, or maybe they do. And if they do, what are the risks that they take and why do they choose the ones that they've taken? So Perry and Eric, why don't you come on up? All right, so let me introduce Harry Karsen first, and then I'll introduce Eric.
Just give me a second to get to the back. If you can do the introductions from here, that'd be better.
Thank you. Perry is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operations Officer at Celgene Corporation, and he was also recently appointed Chief Executive Officer of Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, which is a division dedicated to placental stem cell research and cell therapy regenerative medicine division, and that happened in May of 2013. Prior to coming to Celgene, Perry was Senior Vice President and Head of Worldwide Business Development. Oh, I'm sorry, he was Previous to this, he was Senior Vice President and Head of Worldwide Business Development at Celgene, and was responsible for emerging business in the the Asia-Pacific region. And from 2009 and 2010, Perry served as President and Chief Executive Officer at Pearl Therapeutics, which was a privately held biotech company that was subsequently acquired by AstraZeneca. And he's held other positions in the life sciences field. He's a member of various boards of directors, very well-respected person in the industry, and is here to talk about why Celgene is involved in this space in the way that they are. Sitting in the middle chair is Eric Roman. Eric has an engineering background and a business background, receiving his M.B.A. from Harvard Business School, and has been with General Electric for 25 years. He's been part of the GE Life Sciences division since GE's acquisition of Amersham in 2004. And he's held a variety of business and commercial roles over the past 10 years in the life sciences area, and currently runs the business unit of research and applied markets. And this is the division within which the cell therapy technologies business is housed. So welcome, Eric and Perry.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
So with that background that I gave, we're talking about the risk level that we're willing to take here, right? Your companies have both done extremely well. And maybe it would be good to talk a little bit first about what it is that you're doing in the industry now. What is the play you're making, Eric? What is GE doing? And I just wanted to start with that.
Sure. From a General Electric standpoint, we've been investing in the cellular space for quite a number of years, actually, probably well over a decade. We started out on the research side, focusing on cellular tools. We built platforms that enabled discovery to occur. And then we've, over a period of time, have progressed to include the development of tools or cells as tools. And then from there, we've expanded and taken advantage of our bioprocess business and the technologies that exist there and how they're being applied into the cellular therapy areas. And in the more recent years, we've actually created a division called Cell Therapy, which is headed by Phil Vanek on our team. And we're really looking to provide solutions to the marketplace and to help ultimately industrialize the cell therapy applications that are out there. We're a firm believer that we need to enable the scaling of this industry to occur. We view that as part of our responsibility. It's a position that we've played in the bioprocess business and one that we're investing in right now for the cell therapy industry.
When you say cells as tools, what are you referring to?
Well, for example, cardiomyocytes and using that for toxicity testing and so forth. So we've invested in that space, and it's been part of an educational process for ourselves. So we just didn't walk in one day and said, we're going to go do and be a player in cell therapy. When you look over time, it's something that has evolved, and we've been leveraging the core competencies that we have within our business. And then we've taken calculated risks in expanding our portfolio and our expertise within the organization. Sometimes that's from scientists within our own group. Sometimes we've gone out and brought in industry experts, like a Stephen Minger, to come in and just challenge the way we think, take us to a new frontier, and then, within the business, figure out whether or not these are good investments or bad investments. And I would like to tell you that there's a robust process, but passion has a big play in this. And we've got people who are passionate about this industry, and they can move the internal mountains of GE to make things happen.
We should talk about that in a little while, about how you make that happen, because that's obviously companies like GE, as I mentioned before, they're pretty stable companies, right? And
From
they
the
like
outside.
to move. Okay, from the outside. Depends on how you define stable, I guess. So Perry, can you talk a little bit about what Celgene's play is at the moment? Yeah.
So Celgene is a therapeutic company, and we rely on tool companies like GE. But we've always been a very opportunistic company. We're the company that repurposed thalidomide, and it turned out to be a standard of care for multiple myeloma. So about a little more than a decade ago, we were doing some work with a small company in New Jersey called Anthrogenesis that was founded by a very tremendous entrepreneur, Dr. Robert Hariri. And we were able to show that our IMiDs, thalidomide, Revlimid, pomalidomide, our main drugs in cancer, they were able to differentiate the placental stem cells that Dr. Hariri was collecting and storing for clients. So through that collaboration, we ended up acquiring Anthrogenesis. And for the last almost 10 years, as long as GE has been in this field, we've been nurturing that technology to the point now that it is a therapeutic, both from tissues. We have some tissue products that are going to be introduced very shortly by our partner, Aliqua Biopharmaceuticals, as well as some cell therapy products that are in the clinic and will be advancing to phase 2 and beyond over the next year or so. So we have had the luxury, because our company has been a hematology oncology company, we've had the luxury of being able to invest in the research, advance the science, and a number of my colleagues who have been doing that for years are here today, and we are now at the cusp, we believe, of transforming that science into therapeutics. So for us, it's very exciting, and what I tell my colleagues at Celgene and folks on the outside, that we believe at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics that in the 2020s, the products that will come out of our unit at Celgene will help lead the growth, the continued growth of Celgene in that decade. We'll see.
So how long ago did you acquire Bob's Anthrogenesis?
A little bit more than 10 years ago,
10
back
years
in
ago.
2003, so about 10, 11 years ago.
Right, so at that time in 2003, what were the main challenges that you faced within Celgene to make something like that happen?
It was a huge challenge, and Bob can attest to that. You know, Celgene was a hematology oncology company. We were in the process of developing Revlimid, which today is our main product for multiple myeloma and other hematological malignancies. It sells over $4 billion. So if the company was not successful with Revlimid back in those days, there wouldn't have been a Celgene. So Celgene Cellular Therapeutics really had to nurture itself. It was in a separate building, so geographically it was separated. It was given some resources, but the focus of the company was on our IMiD products, thalidomide, Revlimid, and some follow-on products. It wasn't on cell therapy. So it's a real testament to Bob and the team there that they continued to persevere and advance the science pretty much under the radar at Celgene, other than the annual budget process. And today we've emerged over the last couple of years to have therapeutics that are in the clinic and are advancing. So it was a huge challenge during those times.
What's the difference in your approach now? Are you just it's just that play? Are you looking at other plays? What are you thinking now?
You know, from the therapeutic side, we are really seeing now a convergence of cell therapy with other therapeutic modalities. If you look at the collaboration we have for chimeric antigen receptor T cells with Bluebird Bio and Baylor College of Medicine, those products, they're engineered T cells, but the convergence in immuno-oncology, using those cells as therapies, maybe using PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors, other biologics, other antibodies in conjunction, we're seeing all of this starting to come together. So from a Celgene perspective, cell therapy, even though we are a separate division, we're geographically in our own location, and we're fully integrated, the cell therapy products are starting to merge with the other products in our hematology and oncology therapeutic franchise, all being combined potentially to hopefully turn some of these diseases into chronically treated conditions. So it really is a convergence that we've seen over the last couple of years.
A convergence of
Therapeutic modalities, of using cell therapies as therapies, but using them in conjunction with other means, maybe in conjunction with an antibody that attacks a specific target, or in conjunction with some of the immune checkpoint inhibitors that are coming out of Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck and others. So we're seeing that all come together. And for us, it really resonated with our CAR-T collaboration because it originated, that science, the engineered T-cell work, originated at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, but it converged with our hematology folks on the rest of the Celgene side because they saw the potential for CAR-T cells as a therapeutic, also as monotherapy, but also in combination with some of the other therapeutics that they were developing. So it all started to come together, and we're in a very advantageous position in that we have a cell therapy group as well as a more traditional small molecule biologics group as well.
Is there, Eric and GE, is there a parallel to that? Is there some convergence that's happening within the GE portfolio?
There definitely is. And I was thinking about that as Perry was talking here. When you look at our bioprocess business, so ours is kind of a divergence, which I think will then come back to a convergence, because initially we're innovating new technologies for cell therapies, but then we're also stealing, frankly, from the bioprocess industry. And in the bioprocess industry, the foundation of those technologies are very strong. and robust. But the applications that they are needed for cell therapy require some modifications to those technologies. And so what we're doing really is taking a very strong, robust platforms, take the WAVE system, for example, for expansion of cells, and we've made modifications and innovations to that to launch the Zuri platform, which looks very similar, but some of the technologies that we're putting in place on that are specific to cell therapy applications that the bioprocess teams don't need and don't necessarily would have never thought about putting on the platform. So we're actually starting to bring that to build our platforms on the cell therapy side. And then at some point in the future, you could see it all coming back together again. Because things that become relevant on cell therapy, because the needs are different right now, may become more relevant to the bioprocess industry in the future. So we've got a similar story, but a slightly different track where we're taking technologies initially, reinventing them, expanding their capabilities, and then in the future, I could see them coming back together again.
We're all very good at, when we give these presentations, most of us have a slide. I think everybody that gives a talk in this industry has a slide of all the challenges, and we start with that. And that's usually when all the investors leave the room, because we can list out all of the things that are in our way, getting successful, reaching the end. There's no doubt, though, that as we move forward, the solutions are beginning to form, and they're forming, as they have previously in other industries, directly around the lines of the challenges that are presented to this particular industry. And it sounds like some of that is happening, and some of that might even be driving, what's happening here. What are we learning from other industries? So we're learning from, it sounds like we're learning from the other therapeutic modality space, and perhaps other industries have created tools. Where are we on that curve, maybe is a better way to ask it. We'd like to think of ourselves as the next biologics. So where are we on that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to go first. So the analogy that we use within Celgene Cellular Therapeutics is we view the regenerative medicine industry very similar to where monoclonal antibodies were, say, 20, 25 years ago. Many of us, those of us who are old enough to remember that, can remember the days of Senecor and the rise and the falls when there was the hope and the promise of their antibodies for sepsis originally, and it failed. IDEC. I was at Genentech at the time when Genentech licensed in Rituxan. IDEC was the company was very much on fumes at the time, and now we look at Rituxan as one of the major leading therapeutics for some awful hematological malignancies. So 20, 25 years ago, monoclonal antibodies held a lot of promise, but companies weren't sure exactly how to develop them, how they would be used, if it was liquid tumors, solid tumors. We see the same thing in regenerative medicine, specifically in cell therapy, that it's taken us a number of years to determine how that science can be translated into the clinic. We're in the clinic now. A number of us are. You're going to hear of companies this afternoon who are in the clinic, who are advancing these therapies. And over the next few years, we're going to have successes. We're going to have some failures. But ultimately, we're going to have products that are going to make it to the market and that are going to help patients at the end of the day. And so I believe we are now on that curve of advancing this science. It's no longer just a lot of hope and hype and dreams. It's actually data that we're producing, and we're hopefully having a major impact on patients. And over the next 3, 5, 8 years, we're going to see those products hit the market. And we'll be sitting here 8 years, 10 years from now saying, well, whoever doubted that we'd have this array of products out on the market. So it is going to happen. And to your point earlier, Bob, about large pharmaceutical companies coming into the space. Again, very similar to monoclonal antibodies. There's no large pharmaceutical company today that doesn't have monoclonal antibodies as therapeutics. 10, 15 years ago, there were very few even dreaming of the space. So the same thing is going to happen here, and we're definitely up on that inflection curve.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, there's copies of the survey, I think, that'll be given out today, if they haven't already. And this is the Pharma Survey that looks at where is the industry today in terms of its involvement in cell therapy and regenerative medicine. And to a company that we talked with, there's a tremendous amount of interest, and there's money flowing in. We're waiting for the enormous investments. There are some very big ones right now, and we're very, we're lightened by that. But I think that's a great case. So you're saying 10 years? To Herceptin, 10 years to
Yeah, definitely. 10 years to the next Herceptin or Rituxan. But over the next 3, 5, 8 years, we're going to start seeing these products flow to the market. The industry has one product out on the market today, but we're going to start seeing those, especially on the more tissue therapeutic side. Those products are out there, and there's going to be more to come. But on the cell therapy, yeah, I think it's going to be the next 5 to 8 years. And from an investor standpoint, it's figuring out which of those companies are going to be the ones that are going to make it. And if you had a portfolio of monoclonal antibody companies 20 years ago, you would have done very well.
Eric, what's GE thinking here?
It's similar for us. I mean, we look at the monoclonal antibody market as well, where we have a large position. So we've got some history in that space, and our timelines are similar. Yep. We're probably in the 10 to 15 year timeline, and we're lagging behind the monoclonal antibodies is our perspective. When we look at the trends in the industry, what therapies are on the market today, where is pharma investing, the fact that pharma is jumping in quite significantly, and you look back over time and when those occurred, it's about 10 to 15 years, right? Now the question is, how fast will the curve ramp up? And what are the challenges that the cell therapy industry faces today from a tools and technology standpoint? Because we look at our job as enabling this to grow, enabling us to hit scale as an industry. And the challenges on cell therapy will be different than the ones on mAbs, but we're going to take advantage of what we've learned over there. And then we don't know all the challenges we're yet going to face, but if we believe the parallel, which we do, the hill is coming, and it's going to be a quick rise, we believe. If you look, I think it was 10 years ago, it was a $5 billion industry. Today, it's 60 billion plus. That's a fairly rapid increase. Now, we've got to figure out, and one of the things we're investing in is the diversity of technologies in cell therapy. You've got the scale up, right, which is similar to the mAbs, but then you've got the scaling out for the autologous applications. And that introduces some new challenges and some new opportunities. And as a tool supplier, it's a fascinating place, right? And there's innovations and excitement in that space and things that we believe we can help to ensure that that's successful. Doing a few patient studies, one thing, when you want to do 5,000 the same way, it's a totally different process, right? And so we're looking at that industrialization. How do we do it? How do we bring the skill sets together? And how do we take advantage of what we've learned in other industries and then apply it to the cell therapy space? And at the same time, we've got to go not only continue to challenge our internal innovation like we did previously, so we can't get complacent and assume it's the same as bioprocessing and mAbs, because there are significant differences. That's one of the reasons why we actually run this outside of our bioprocess business. We didn't put cell therapy inside the bioprocess business. We actually keep it separate. So you can steal from it, but you allow it to innovate along the same way that mAbs did previously. And so I think it's 10 to 15 years, very exciting space, but that's to get to where we're at today. But in that process and along the way, I think we've got a great business. So people need to buy the tools.
Let me pause for a second and ask, does anybody have any questions? Andrew? I'll repeat it. Oh, you got it? You have a mic?
I said, other than human nature, why do you think there's the level of skepticism around the ability to commercialize at scale cell therapies? Is there, to your knowledge, some physical, technical, biologic hurdle that's unique to cell therapy that you've seen that didn't exist for hematopoietic growth factors, monoclonal antibodies, small molecules?
From a platform standpoint, look, I think it's the scaling out process right now that we see as the biggest challenge and the opportunity, and the consistency of how do you characterize that therapy for the individual patients, right? And so we're making investments in trying to figure out how to make sure that when you're producing that therapy for the individual in an autologous application, how do you know it's going to be successful, and how do you characterize that therapy? Right, that patient. And we don't understand, I don't think the industry understands all the complexities associated with that and all the things that could impact the ultimate outcome. And so I think that's one of the things that makes people hesitant. But from my standpoint, that's all opportunity. I mean, it's all opportunity for me, because those are things that we think we can solve, we need to invest in, and they're hurdles that we should be able to overcome. But that's something, to answer your question, what would make you nervous? I think that can make some people nervous as an example, as one.
Yeah, I think, again, the analogy is recombinant DNA. There was a lot of skepticism 30 years ago that you were going to be able to take E. coli cells and then CHO cells and scale this up and to have the assays to ensure that this was a pharmaceutical quality product and glycosylation and all of those issues. And today, it's fairly routine. The same thing, this is not easy, it's not trivial. Our head of technical operations, Greg Rosati, is in the audience here. He's been working on this his whole career. And it is a very iterative, long process to get to the point where you have pharmaceutical-grade product. But the industry is getting there. We're getting there certainly at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics. We make our own product for clinical trials. Others are getting there as well. But that skepticism, I think, always exists when you have a new, huge technological hurdle. And working with companies like GE, we're overcoming that. So 10 years from now, 15 years ago, I think it'll be routine. And we'll look back and say, that was trivial.
Just to give you an example, the person who runs our bioprocess business today, which is over $1 billion business, used to work in pharmaceuticals over a decade ago and made a recommendation to his pharma company not to do MABs because it would never scale.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so
Right. Yeah.
there's a lot of learning, I think, that's gone on. And so there's challenges and things that we're going to need to address. But I think history would say that the naysayers have become, very strong supporters of the technology as it moves forward. And it's just a matter of cracking those down into bite-sized pieces and solving the problems.
We've been saying, as we've been looking at engineering as one of the solutions, and you mentioned Greg, and you all have seen this for a while, that's one of the solutions. Certainly GE has a couple of engineers working in the company. There's a quote that we've been fond of talking about in the 1950s. There was somebody who predicted that computers would be a great success and that someday there'd be 5 of them in the world. Right?
Right, exactly.
And through some engineering and integration and automation and the like, it's obviously that was underestimated by some degree. So, I saw another hand up. Yes, please. A microphone is coming over. Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you decide what applications to focus on. I'm knowledgeable about Celgene's first approval for leprosy, which isn't exactly a huge market. Are you guided by the science? Are you guided by the market?
Yeah. At Celgene overall, and certainly at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, we're guided by the science. With cell therapy, as I said, we've been working on this for 10 years, trying to determine the best applications of our cell therapies, working with a variety of preclinical models. So we've been guided by the science on where we think these cells can have the greatest impact on patients. And frankly, we've looked at a number of diseases as we entered the clinic. Initially, about 2 years ago, we looked at 3, 4, 5 different indications, and we've now narrowed it down. And as we're trying to really ascertain the mechanism of action of these cells, that will also help us figure out the science going forward. The same thing that happened with the IMiDs, with the thalidomide and Revlimid, as we've now learned how that mechanism of action works, and it took years to figure that out, we're able to guide where else those drugs may have applications. So the science will lead us as we learn more about the mechanism. That will help us then guide to indications, but our initial indications will be where the science tells us to go.
So, yes, please.
Just a question on autologous versus allogeneic. What's the split of the projects that are in development for both the companies? And how do you think about them, and why go after one over the other?
Yeah. Autologous may present, at least today, some greater commercialization challenges, but from a clinical standpoint, the opportunity may be more immediate and more profound. At Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, we're working on both. We have our CAR-T program. That's an autologous therapy. We have our placental-derived adherent cells, which we expand from a general cell population, and those are more of an off-the-shelf. So we're pursuing both, and we believe that the technological challenges and commercialization challenges for autologous will be solved, especially if the therapeutic impact is there. And with CAR-T, some of the work that's been done at UPenn and elsewhere shows that there could be a very significant impact. So we're somewhat agnostic to autologous versus allogeneic. Again, we'll see where the science leads us and where we can have the greatest impact. And our philosophy overall, to the earlier question as well, is we at CCT and also as an industry need to get some cell therapies out on the market that are going to have a great impact on patients, regardless of how large the market is. When we worked with thalidomide and Revlimid, the multiple myeloma market was very small because there were no treatments out there for that disease. Today, there are multi-billions of dollars of therapeutics. So we just want to make sure that we're going to have a profound and important impact on patients and get these cell therapies out, whether they're autologous or allogeneic.
Eric, you alluded to that as well with the tools and your patient-specific versus off-the-shelf side.
We're investing in both, and we've got strong technologies in the allogeneic area, leveraging the bioprocess space in the scaling up. On the autologous side, we're innovating more on that front. I think there's more gaps that generally exist in that space, and we're leveraging those technologies to solve those gaps. And those gaps are not only hardware specific gaps and opportunities that need to be solved. There's software that needs to be thought about. It's the whole chain of command and control. I think about it, when you're going to take cells out of a patient and then you're going to process them and put them back into the patient, how do you track those cells through their entire life, all the way through the processes? If they're in a wave bag and a Zuri system and they're rocking back and forth, how long do they rock back and forth? What was the temperature on it? What was the cell culture media that you used? What was the batch records from that? How do you characterize them at the end of the day? How do you collect all that information, right? And then feed that back into the medical record for that individual? Because from my perspective, that's the patient who's actually going through the process. It's a piece of the patient. And ultimately, you're putting it back into the patient with a therapy. And then you want to know, why did it work? Why didn't it work? And go back and be able to quality control your processes on the thousands of patients that you may be doing and understand why some may work, some may not work. All right, so those are some of the challenges and how we're looking at it and the hurdles, but the opportunities I see on the autologous side. And on the allogeneic side, again, it's leveraging the core that we have already in bioprocess and driving that scale.
So much of this conversation we could have had 10 years ago as well, right? Those types of challenges haven't changed. We have clearly moved along the line in solving many of them. And the more big players get involved, the more little players get involved, the more we think about this, the farther along we are. And we are, people in this room, I think, are familiar with the hockey stick projection. I'm sure you've seen them. We all have them. Are we at that point? Are we at an inflection point now? You know, we talk about being at this inflection point. You just said 10 years, 10 years. There'll be products on the market 3 to 5. We're in a line along that that Gartner curve, perhaps we're approaching. Are we at that inflection point now?
Our inflection point may be ahead of the therapeutics inflection point because we're a provider of the tools to allow that scale to occur and to happen. All right, so I'd say our inflection point, you know, we're there. Things are, my team isn't big enough to address all the requests that are coming in. Right, the number of pharma companies that want to work with us, the number of governments that want to work with us, it outstrips our capacity and our capability to satisfy, to be honest with you. And so we're trying to balance an overwhelming demand, frankly, in the marketplace at this point in time. So are we at the inflection point? Yeah, I'd say we feel that we are at the inflection point, and it's an exciting place to be.
I think from the service provider perspective, we're in that we feel the same thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic, actually.
And both of you are the leading edge, so that's great to hear. I think we just need to be cautious on the therapeutic side about the hockey stick projections, because that kind of maybe at times unrealistic expectations, I think, is some of the reason for the skepticism in the industry overall, that we keep projecting these hockey sticks and we keep pushing them out and we don't get there. I think it's going to be a more gradual slope as companies have products coming to market, and maybe they don't satisfy huge market needs initially, but they are proof of principle that cell therapy can provide a meaningful therapy for patients, and over time we'll see it ramp up. And again, I think if we go back to things like monoclonal antibodies, you know, Herceptin wasn't a $4 billion product or whatever it is today overnight. Neither was Rituxan. Those ramped slowly, and the industry grew slowly. So we'll see it, but I think we just need to temper and make sure we have realistic expectations so that we don't then disappoint, but people see the progress being made over time. But it's great to hear the progress you guys are seeing. That's the leading edge.
Frankly, what we could benefit from the investor community is investing more in smaller startup tools companies that have innovative ideas and concepts. As a corporation, we've got two two piles of money, right? One of them is our organic funds, and we're investing internally. And believe it or not, inside G is kind of, you've got to go like almost to a VC board and get funding for this. And so we're funding growth internally and bringing on talent and expertise to do that and leveraging our core competencies and expanding them out. At the same time, there's another pile of money, which is for acquisition opportunities. And we'd love to see more opportunities out there in the tool space to acquire. It's a bit thin. We'd like some more. We'd like to see some more opportunities. We can't innovate everything ourselves. All right, so we do look to the industry and to the marketplace for innovation and new ideas, and how do we bring that together, and how ultimately do we bring the best solution possible to the therapeutic providers so that this can be successful. I mean, we're very much linked on success. We need each other's success to happen. And so our goal is to make the therapeutic companies as successful as possible, as profitable as possible, and ensure that the quality of the product is as good as possible. But we can't do that all on our own. And so that's where the investment community can really help.
You know, it's a really great point, Eric, because that is exactly where the investment community can help, certainly on the therapeutic side as well. We also scour the universe for opportunities. Winston Kung, our Chief Business Officer, is here talking to companies today. We want to find those opportunities that we can either partner with, license, acquire, so that we then build our therapeutic portfolio similarly to what you're doing on the tool side. So from an investor perspective, now is the time to start placing bets on those companies that have the most promising therapeutic opportunities from our perspective, so that over time, as that data is generated, we will see those as opportunities for us to collaborate.
So that goes to the question of why now, right? I mean, you've each mentioned convergence, you've mentioned this inflection for tools providers and whatnot. Does it go to what keeps you up at night? There's so many opportunities. What keeps you up at night first, and then maybe go to that question about why should investors invest now if we're on this curve that's maybe 10 years away from a huge
It depends on the day. Sometimes it's I feel we're too late. Sometimes I feel we're too early. So it depends on what's going on that day. I would say, what keeps me up at night. In our industry and the way we view the marketplace, right? Again, drawing the analogy to MABs, there are certain aspects that are going to be designed in at a very early stage of the process. Okay, and we don't know which ones of these are going to be successful, which ones will not be successful. Our job is to try and make them all successful from a tools perspective. But if we're not involved early and the protocols get set and the technologies are selected, we're designed out, or you're designed in. Right? So the biggest fear is you miss the ones to be part of, and you're designed into that process, because once those protocols are established, there's certain parts of the process which will be very difficult to change or people will not want to change. Right? Those are the ones that we want to be part of. There's other parts of the process which have a bit more flexibility to it. We want to be part of those too, but you always have an opportunity to capture that at some point in the future. So my fear is that we're just going to miss the opportunity to get in on the ground floor to try and design in the technologies we have, while at the same time maybe modifying the technologies we have to meet the specific needs of that therapy, such that the therapy will be as successful as possible. So that's my biggest concern.
How about you, Perry?
My biggest concern, I think, is the one that haunts anybody who's in the therapeutic area, which is that hopefully not, but we see some sort of adverse event that then sets back the whole industry. Tragically, 10 or so years ago in the gene therapy field, we saw this, and the field has taken about a decade to now be where it is today and moving forward in clinical trials. So I think, as we all do in therapeutic development, we need to be prudent and cautious, and patient safety is first and foremost as we advance the technology. But I think that's one of my bigger fears.
Any comments or questions?
There's one back there.
Yes, we have.
So what are the main drivers for your two companies to invest in this space? Is it the unmet medical need? Is it the fresh intellectual property space? Is it the unique mode of action or the polypharmacy-based approach of these cells? Because arguably small molecules and antibodies, as you said, are the safer bet. So what's the main driver?
For us, it is the therapeutic potential. Cell therapy has the potential truly to be curative. We don't know exactly the mechanism of action. These cells probably work differently in different patient environments depending on their disease, and they do hold the potential to cure a number of diseases across a wide spectrum from cancer to neurodegenerative diseases to musculoskeletal. So for us, it's that huge promise of going from small molecules to biologics and now to cell therapy. And we believe that promise is very real, and we as an industry are advancing it. And 10, 20 years from now, we will realize hopefully some true curative results from these therapies. So that for us is what impact, the profound impact we can have on patients.
Okay, from a GE standpoint, we've got something called Health Imagination. And it's around cost, quality, and access for patients, and the role that we play in enabling that to occur. All right, so we see the cell therapy marketplace being the next big wave coming in therapies. And we view our job is to make sure it's got low cost, high quality, and there's accessibility globally for this. And that we provide through various technologies. So that's why we're part of it. We think there's a huge market potential that exists. It aligns fundamentally with the corporate objectives that we have as a business and where we want to invest. And when you look across GE, which is a fairly large company, we've got the specific tasks that my group is doing. But in addition to that, we've got venture funds that are investing in this space as well. We've got the GE Capital business, which is lending money to companies in this space as well. So we are participating in the growth potential of this industry in a diversity of ways. And when I wear my small hat, we're the tools provider. When you wear the larger GE hat, we're a provider of financial services. We're a provider of innovation in different ways. We've got activities at our research centers and applying for grants to advance technologies that are at a very, very early stage as well. We've got partnerships that we're working on with different academic institutions to help them be more successful. So we're playing in this field in a diversity of ways. And the tools is just one of the ways that GE is trying to help make this industry successful. And again, it's under that banner of health imagination, cost, quality, and access for people globally.
What is the GE expectation for you in terms of creating a real business out of this?
Look, I think we've separated out the cell therapy group into its own business unit, and we're running it like a startup company. And it's got the spirit of a startup company, right? So the expectation is that we're going to grow, obviously, that we're going to build the partnerships and relationships in the critical spaces to make the industry successful and hence make ourselves successful. I don't think the expectations are much different from a startup company outside of GE other than the fact of how we get funded and the additional benefits that we get because of the world that we're surrounded by. We've got the privilege of being able to tap into anyone and everyone in the world in the General Electric company at a phone call, and we've got thousands of Ph.D.s with different skill sets that as a small startup you wouldn't necessarily think to call, but we have the opportunity to actually reach out to them. So the expectation at this stage is that we've got a robust platform strategy, that we are looking far enough into the future so that we are not going to be behind, and we're helping set the trends. Look, I truly believe that there aren't many companies who can think across the scale that we're thinking about and how to tie that whole process together and link it back into the healthcare systems. And that's why we also need to work with small companies too, because we can't do all the innovation ourselves. But, governments call GE, pharma knocks on the door, we knock on their door. There's a lot of discussions happening. And the expectation put on me is that we're figuring out how to take advantage of those and how to make them as successful as possible. And unfortunately, we won't be able to do them all.
Well, clearly that's the same at Celgene.
It's really the same model, and I think because of where the industry and the whole space is in development, that kind of model of setting it up as a startup within a larger company makes perfect sense. We have the same thing at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics. We're 160 people. We are off-site from the rest of Celgene. We're fully integrated, everything from research through development, manufacturing, and commercialization, and it does feel like a startup company. Yet we're part of a larger company, so we have those resources, and financial and human. And that, I think, is the best way to nurture this technology. And then to Eric's earlier point about the need for spawning of smaller companies to help innovate, because we can't do it all alone either. It's companies like GE and Celgene that hopefully can propel the industry by working with those smaller innovative companies as well. So we're very well positioned to help drive this industry going forward.
So it's Regen Med Investor Day, March 26, 2019.
Yeah.
And you guys are back here. What are we telling everybody?
Well, we will be here announcing the launch of our first cell therapy product. I can guarantee you that. That's exactly the year and the timing that we've projected for our division to have that first cell therapy product on the market. It's in development. It's entering phase 2 at the end of this year. We'll have a number of tissue products in partnership with Aliqua Biopharma that will be out there doing great things for patients and becoming a significant advanced biologic wound care business. And we will have a very deep pipeline of opportunities, not all of which are going to pan out, but broad enough that you can see the potential. So we'll be much higher up on that inflection curve, generating revenue, having an impact on patients with a good visibility to the future.
From our standpoint, we're trying to provide an end-to-end solution. And so by that time, I would expect that we would have that, because as you look at these therapeutic opportunities, you break it down into process steps. But if you just select and you optimize each individual process step, you may not be optimizing the total. And I go back to, how do we link it into the software systems? How do we tie it back into the patient medical records? How do we make sure that the complete system works? And I would say from the bioprocess space, we learned that we didn't have the total solution. Matter of fact, we've been spending years now building the total solution in bioprocess from start to finish. The recent acquisition of HiClone helped us very much in that space. So in 4 years from now, I want to say that we've got a solution offering for the industry that's end-to-end. That doesn't mean you can't change bits and pieces along the way, because some people may prefer some different technologies, but that opportunity exists to provide a solution and an end result that makes advancing cell therapy easier, because you want to focus on the therapeutic side, not on the tool side. You want someone to provide you solutions for the tools that you can then manipulate to give you the therapies that you want. My job is to give you those tools. My job is to make your job easier.
Exactly.
Right? And then you can tell me how we're doing in 4 years.
In the
So far you're doing well. Thank you.
bioprocessing space, though, it's much more, there's less diversity in technologies, right?
Yeah.
So how do you see that happening in 5 years from now, that you've got a solution? It's not a solution, but how would you define a solution so that it can facilitate an industry with such diversity in approaches?
Great question. And we've mapped out the workflows for cell therapy applications. And there's a generic workflow, and there's some common process steps that are going to be needed. But then when you dig into the details, it's very diverse, to your point. Right? So look, we're going to have to make those decisions along the way. In the perfect world, I'll have a flexible platform that'll be able to do lots of different things. In the reality world, we're probably going to end up, having some successes in certain areas, and there'll be some parts of the marketplace where GE may not be the leader in it, because there's just too many places to go, and we'll have to partner with other people or work with other people. There'll be a number of players in the industry, I'm assuming. But ideally, we'll have a system that enables some level of flexibility, because you're right, the protocols will be different across the board.
And here's a more difficult question, and we have about 3 minutes left, so if you can just each take about a minute and a half to talk about what happens to the people in this group, the investor community, who invest today on that 5 years. So it's 2019. What's happened to people who are investing today versus those who sit and watch and wait for 5 years now?
Well, from our perspective, the ones who invest today in a portfolio of companies are going to ride that wave, just as if they had been investing in the late 80s, early 90s in monoclonal antibody companies. And an investment in IDEC and Genentech and Centocor in those days would have paid off very handsomely. I think the same thing will happen. It's very going to be difficult to pick that single company that's going to make it. So again, it's a portfolio of investments, but you're going to hear from a number of companies this afternoon, many of which will bring products to market. And those investors who invest today are going to reap the rewards.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I just don't want to be the guy who did invest,
Right?
because they won't be in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I think it's a great time to invest. I think we need you to invest. I need you to invest. I need the innovation that's out there. There's some very, very smart people out there who have some great ideas. We won't find them all. Need your guys' help to do that and help really move the industry forward. We're committed to it. We've been in this industry, for a long time, relatively speaking, and our vision and strategy is long-term. That's one of the great things about GE. We have a long-term view of the world. It's not short-term. And so we need that help.
Great. Well, let me just ask you to join me in thanking Perry and Eric for a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cloud, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll pass on to Ted Tentoff. You coming up, Ted? Is that
All
you
right.
know?